Hey, y'all, and welcome to episode 4 of the Amlet podcast. In our last episode, we entered the third or yellow world. We saw first man and first woman transform from spiritual beings into human beings through ceremony, sacred materials, wind, and the guidance of the holy people. Becoming human, as we've established, means learning how to live well. The humans in this creation story must learn how to create shelter, produce food, make clothing, pass down knowledge, and transform the materials of the natural world into community sustenance. And that's where this episode begins. And we will meet the Spider Man and Spider Woman who teach the people the art of weaving. So as you listen, please ponder this question: why might a creation story devote so much attention to the making of a cloth? At first, weaving may seem like a small domestic skill compared with the creation of things like mountains or rivers or even human beings. But in this story, weaving is an act of creativity. It's an act of independence. But most importantly, for the Navajo, it is an act of cultural memory. Perhaps, too, weaving is a model for how we create community itself. So, like always, please be sure to have your digital copy of the story open and take notes as you see fit. And here we go. Near crossing of the waters lived Spider Man and Spider Woman. They knew how to weave the fibers of cotton and hemp and other plants. First Woman asked Spider Man and Spider Woman to teach people how to weave the fibers of plants so they would not have to depend on animal skins for clothing. So, the crossing of the waters is a place we've encountered earlier where the great female river and the great male river intersect. That location already signifies balance, connection, and transformation. It makes sense then that Spider Man and Spider Woman would live nearby as kind of these figures of balance. They teach and create together, and they contribute different voices to the process, as we'll see. The skill they possess, which is to turn separate fibers into a unified cloth, matches this idea of separate forces coming together to build something in itself, but to build something strong. The first important detail of these opening sentences is that Spider Man and Spider Woman already know how to weave fibers from cotton, hemp, and other plants. Their knowledge comes through observation of the natural world. Spiders are, of course, natural weavers. I I see it everywhere all the time. And as I've been reviewing this story and coming up with these, ideas for these episodes, I appreciate those spider webs much more to my heart. And so, as we said, spiders are natural weavers and they create useful and beautiful material from their own bodies, which just seems miraculous. The web becomes shelter, protection, and as we know it, a means of survival. Because we in the story may associate weaving with spiders, I think we can infer that there is a link between human creativity and the patterns that already exist in nature. It's not like we invented this idea of weaving entirely on our own, after all. Nature, and therefore spiders, they're like teachers. And so, furthermore, the first woman is the person who asks Spider Man and Spider Woman to share their knowledge because she recognizes a need within the community. The people have relied upon animal skins for clothing, but she imagines another possibility. They can grow plants, gather fibers, spin thread, and create cloth. This is keen foresight and innovation to the first woman's credit as she's considering how life might be improved. And we love to have those sorts of people in our corner. Not to mention, there's also kind of like this ethical dimension to her request as well, because because she learns how to make clothing with plant fibers. The people become less and less dependent upon killing animals for skins. The text doesn't necessarily condemn the use of animal skins, but it does show the community developing these alternatives. To me, it connotes a certain respect for other members of the natural world and illustrates an instinct to try to be resourceful and considerate. Human progress involves learning how to meet needs through knowledge, labor, and this careful use of the surrounding world. So let's continue our weaving story in the same paragraph. Cotton seeds were planted and the cotton was gathered. Spider Man taught the people to shape a little wheel 3 or 4 inches in diameter and put a slender stick through it to spin the cotton. First woman said, "You must spin toward your person, not away, as you wish to have the beautiful goods come to you. If you spin away from you, the goods will depart from you." Spider Man named the spindle "Turning Around with the Beautiful Goods." Spider Woman said, "No, it shall be called Turning Around with the Mixed Chips." Curious. So the teaching process begins not first with the spinning toward you, of course, but it begins with the planting. Before cloth can be woven, cotton must be grown. Before it can grow, seeds must be planted into the earth. My farmers listening know all too well. Before the final object appears, the thing we know most of all, there must be patience. This sequence matters because it reminds us that creativity begins long before the finished product. Resident poet here, I tell you that's the truth. The cloth is connected to the seed to the soil, and the soil to the water, the sunlight, the labor, and time. A woven object, therefore, contains an entire network of relationships that the earth shaped, that the community shaped, and, of course, what the maker's hands have shaped. Spider Man first teaches the people how to create a spindle, a simple tool or small wheel with a slender stick running through it. This tool, however, marks an important stage in human development. The people are no longer limited to using natural materials only in the forms in which they find them. They can now transform those materials, like loose cotton or thread to cloth. And it's pretty beautiful that raw nature becomes such an instrumental part of their culture. First woman then offers a very specific instruction, quote, "You must spin toward your person, not away." Her direction is that beautiful goods should come toward the person rather than depart from them. Remember how much directions have already mattered so far in this creation story? So that physical action of spinning toward self illustrates intention to draw beauty toward herself. Her instruction stresses how much the attitude of the maker matters. Because if we're making it, we're like, meh. But it's like each spin is intentional to draw that beauty toward ourselves. The weaver's relationship with the object begins before the cloth even exists. And if anybody is a crocheter or a knitter, you know, like you may have some sort of vision, but you develop a relationship with each knot. That final product is therefore shaped by an initial purpose, and you have to sustain that purpose with each action. Then we encounter the first disagreement of sorts between Spider-Man and Spider-Woman. So Spider-Man gives the spindle a name that means turning around with the beautiful goods. Spider-Woman responds that actually it should instead be called turning around with the mixed chips. My instinct tells me that this exchange is meant to be humorous or playful. Spider-Man repeatedly chooses names associated with something beautiful or precious, while Spider-Woman's sounds more ordinary or practical or mixed. In reality, though, we have to put the two together. Their voices are two halves of the whole purpose of the art form, the practicality and the beauty. One way we might interpret this further is that Spider-Man emphasizes beauty and sacred value of weaving, especially the finished product, the wow factor, while the Spider-Woman values the actual materials and the labor involved, namely all of the smaller pieces that work together in the process. And that's kind of like the two different types of people around whenever we're looking at art as a whole. So let's return to the text about weaving for a moment. After the loom was finished, the cross poles were erected and other poles placed on the ground to hold the loom frame solidly, and the loom was stretched into place. Spider-Man said, "It shall be called Raising with the Beautiful Goods." Spider-Woman said, "No, it shall be called Raising with the Mixed Chips." So, as we can see, the playful disagreement continues between Spider-Man and Spider-Woman. Once again, Spider-Man is associating the object with beautiful goods, while the Spider-Woman describes it in terms of mixed pieces or chips. The repeated exchange may help listeners remember the names of the weaving tools as the rhythm is contributing to memory, not just for the listeners, but then maybe even for the performers of this verbal storytelling. Nonetheless, their disagreement keeps both perspectives alive. Weaving produces beauty, but that beauty, this is just my poet's heart, beauty is made from fragments. A finished textile may look unified, and it should, but it begins as mere individual fibers. The weaver must gather, spin, roll, stretch, cross, and press them together. And the beautiful object cannot exist without the smaller, less impressive materials. So, I don't know, I hope that makes you feel good too and make you feel like you are your own woven something that exists because of those smaller, sometimes beautiful, but sometimes less impressive to the rest of the world, or maybe even to you, materials, but they matter. That idea applies to communities as well. A community may appear to be one people, but it consists of many individuals, families, histories, and so many experiences. Like a woven textile, harmony depends upon distinct parts being connected in a meaningful pattern. The differences remain visible, but they contribute to the whole. The loom must also be raised and held firmly in place as creativity needs structure. A weaver cannot begin throwing thread into the air and hope that cloth appears. The frame creates that stability and it provides the boundaries within which creativity can happen. Students and then even established artists sometimes, like myself, and I'll just speak for myself, I suppose, that art is produced through this great inspiration and freedom and just ugh, But it really depends upon the discipline to pick up the pen and write the thing, the technique, the stuff that your teacher tells you, doing it over and over again, that repetition, great patience, and the willingness to follow a process. And my writer teacher heart and the writing process, I love that as well. So let's read a little bit more into the text now that we've established some discipline and foundation to this weaving process. There was a notched stick running across, with a notch holding every other thread. Spider-Man said, "It will be called Looming with the Beautiful Goods." Spider-Woman said, "No, it shall be called Looping with the Mixed Chips." Then they used a narrow stick about 2.5 feet long and wound the yarn or thread over it, and where there is no design, they ran it along. That was given the same name as the ball of thread. They used the wide, flat stick for tapping down the thread. Spider-Man said, "It shall be called Looping with the Beautiful Threads." But Spider-Woman said, "It shall be called Looping with the Mixed Chips." Now we're introduced to several specialized tools. The notched stick separates alternating threads. The narrow stick carries the yarn across the loom. The wide, flat stick presses the thread securely into place. Each tool has a distinct function, and no single tool creates the cloth alone. This is another reminder that creation is collaborative. Even when one person sits at the loom, that person depends upon the knowledge, materials, tools, teachers, and traditions. Whew, a lot of alliteration there, Kels, that existed before the weaving even began. The notched stick is notably important because it creates space between the threads, which allows another thread to pass through. The pattern depends upon the opening and closing, the separation and union, over and under, back and forth. Weaving is built from those opposites working together. So hopefully we're seeing the importance of that difference and the opposites and the balance all together just in these first several episodes. We've got male and female, east and west, north and south, earth and sky, spirit and body, as well as water and fire. The story implies that this difference creates balance too. The woven cloth becomes strong, right? Because the thread moves in different directions. The act of tapping the threads down also deserves our attention before we move on. Each new row must be pressed into the previous one. So without that pressure, the weaving may remain loose or unstable. And growth kind of needs that consolidation. And we want to have something beautiful and practical. And for it to be both things, you have to have the pressure to keep it together. New knowledge must be connected to what has already been learned, and new generations must be connected to generations before them. The community expands when those strong relationships hold it together. So, of course, this story is not just about the weaving, it's about the larger community being built. Spider-Man and Spider-Woman continue to offer different names for the tools. Again, one emphasizing beauty, the other with mixed and ordinary materials. And conjoined, we infer that art exists because of imagination and the labor. Some of the most blue-collar spirited people I know in my life are artists. Weavers are not. They have both of those spirits, the imagination and the labor. The finished weave may appear extraordinary, but it's a product of repeated, ordinary movements. And there's something sacred in that daily work. All right. And so our final paragraph about weaving in the Navajo creation story is next. So listen along. Spider-Man then said, "Now you know all that I have named for you. It is yours to work with and to use following your own wishes. But from now on, when a baby girl is born to your tribe, you shall go and find a spider web woven at the mouth of a small hole. You must take it and rub it on the baby's hand and arm. Thus, when she grows up, she will weave, and her fingers and arms will not tire from weaving." I wish we had such sweet traditions like this. Uh, it's a beautiful image, and I love that it emphasizes the longevity and the intergenerational wisdom that comes from weaving. So at the end of the lesson, Spider-Man gives the knowledge to the people. He tells them, quote, "It is yours to work with and to use following your own wishes." People are taught a tradition, but they are also given some creative freedom instead of just reproducing the same object forever. They can use this knowledge according to their own wishes, like just like we do. We learn a skill if it is an art form, if it's a craft, and we understand the foundations of it, but then we get to add our own little spins to it to make it ours. We can develop designs, experiment with patterns, respond to the needs of the community, and express our own individual creativity in the process. And while it can be individual, it's still this participation in a shared cultural practice. And I love what this last paragraph says about the relationship between tradition and innovation. Because I know I'm going to have traditional spirits listening and I'm going to have innovative spirits listening. So this brings both of you together. Tradition provides the skill. Then the artist decides what to create with it. With weaving as an example of a multi generational cross cultural practice, I think we can conclude that paradoxically and poetically, a tradition survives because we use the foundation to inspire new acts of creation. So we need the tradition and we need the innovation. Ultimately, Spider Man then gives instructions for what should happen when a baby girl is born. The family is to find a spider web at the mouth of a hole and rub it across the baby's hand and arm. The purpose of all of this is to prepare her for weaving so that her hands will not tire. Such is a ritual that connects the child directly to the Spider Woman's knowledge. Before the girl can even speak, work, or weave, she's welcomed into this tradition in this kind of ceremonial action. The spider web in the end becomes like a blessing. Oh, now I'm not going to be able to take my broom and knock down the spider webs on my gutters because the spider web is a blessing of dexterity, endurance, creativity, and connection to the first teachers of weaving. And that just feels so wholesome too. The ritual also shows how knowledge is passed between generations. Instead of like waiting until adulthood, from birth, the child is connected to practices that existed before her. I think we, maybe if you all are anything like me, we often wait and think, oh, we'll do it when they're older. But the Navajo, right out the gate when they're a child, to fold them into this part of the culture. The ancestors, the holy people, the natural world, and the women who will teach her all support this future work. And it's like they rally around her and she doesn't begin alone. So let us resist the temptation to dismiss this practice as superstition. Just look around. The world we live in today is further and further disconnected from origin, and each new generation contains fewer interested individuals in the cultural practices of their own communities, and they instead assimilate into the mainstream. We're more disconnected from the skills that our past communities nurtured, and we often don't turn to children anymore to be prepared to teach and value their culture. And for the Navajo and their appreciation of weaving, they wish for strong hands, beautiful work, and knowledge for the next generation. And it makes me emotional, sorry. But I ask you to consider how much you carry and what you'd like to resurrect or pass on to those younger than you, hopefully to further appreciate the beautiful community that you're a part of, but then appreciate this section of the Navajo creation story a bit further. Though not as dramatic, I think, as some of the other episodes and sections of this creation story, the spider weaving tale here marks an essential stage in human development, which is creating culture. Clothing serves a practical purpose, of course, protecting the body and providing warmth, but woven goods can also display beauty, identity, family traditions, spiritual meaning, and artistic skill. A woven textile is communicating, it's like an object that communicates. It's got its own thing to say. It's a storyteller all on its own, and it's a technology and it's an art. The distinction we sometimes make between useful objects and art objects does not work well here because there isn't a distinction for the Navajo when it comes to weaving. So, as we finish this section, think back to the question I posed at the beginning of the episode. Why would a creation story devote so much attention to weaving? To me, it's because creation continues and evolves whenever knowledge is passed down, whenever separate materials are joined into something both beautiful and useful, and whenever an artist takes an inherited tradition and makes it anew. The story of Spider Man, Spider Woman, and weaving teaches us again about culture and relationship. Humans learn from nature, students from teachers, children from their communities, as well as artists from tradition. The loom itself becomes a symbol of harmony and so important to the Navajo because it contains so much opposition and diversity as a complete product, just like the world evolving around them in the Navajo creation story. So, thank you for tuning in to the AMLIT podcast, folks. In our next episode, we will explore the separation of men and women here in the third world, and it's got a lot of drama. So I will see you there. And until then, take care.